France rugby teams are normally like a Christmas gift that you haven't unwrapped. There's a lot of hype and a lot of potential, but when you open it, it's sometimes disappointing and it doesn't live up to its full potential. And that's what I see sometimes in French rugby teams. And that's what I saw again last night. So even Etienne 139 cap, Sia Kolisi was playing his 100th cap. Rassi Erasmus was taking his 50th game in charge of the South African Springboks. And the French, well, they had won 15 out of their last 16 games at the Stade De France. So what could possibly happen last night in Paris? Let's go and talk about it in the park. G'day everyone, welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. If you haven't been here before, my name's Mark. I'm a Kiwi rugby fan living here in beautiful Cancun. And wow, what a game we had in Paris last night. Let's get into it, want to talk about it. And right from the get-go, well, as you had expected, France was going to start off storming in this game. Let's face it, if they hadn't started strong in the first few minutes, then that was going to be a bad night for them, that's for sure. But they started off really well. They had lots of energy. A couple of mistakes in the first 90 seconds from South Africa. We saw Colby drop a high ball. We saw Peter Steph-Totoy do a little bit of an error, and we thought, wow, France are going to get on the front foot here. And on the front foot, did they what? And it was through that man Thomas Ramos in the 4th minute with a great kick across the field that put Damien Penaud in for his first try of the game last night. And it was a fantastically executed move from France. Ramos again putting the ball on a dime, sitting up perfectly for Penaud to go in and score the try. And Ramos, of course, he was able to get the conversion over. So France went out to an early lead. It was 7 points to 0. And the French crowd, well, they started to believe early on in this game. Now, I think what was going to be important in this game is that South Africa kept in touch with France on the scoreboard if France were able to get off to a good lead. And that's exactly what they did. So after the 4th minute, when we saw that try from Damien Penaud, we saw an opportunity for South Africa to get on the board, and it was a penalty opportunity through Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu. And to start off with in this game, he had his kicking boots on and it sailed between the posts. So we're back to 7 points to 3 after 8 minutes, and it was starting to turn into one of those games that was going to be a real tussle, but it was also a brilliant game to watch early on. It kind of had the feel of a final of a Rugby World Cup, didn't it, in terms of the intensity, and the crowd were getting right into it because of that wonderful start that France had. Just after that penalty kick from Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu, we saw Lut de Jager go off with an HIA. Ruan Norkia came on for the Springboks, and it was going to be interesting to see whether or not that made too much difference. But South Africa were next to score. They got another penalty opportunity, and Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu absolutely nailed it. He's got a great kicking action. It's very smooth. The ball sails very high. And this one went straight over the post as well. So we were back to 7 points to 6 after 11 minutes in the game. Now, one of the important elements of the game was going to be the scrums. Of course, South Africa were going to back themselves to see whether or not they were able to get some scrum penalties. An interesting statistic was that South Africa had won more scrum penalties in the Rugby Championship than the other 3 teams combined. So that was a part of the game that they were really counting on, and it wasn't long before they started getting rewarded. But we did see some interesting moves from South Africa. Of course, Bohan Venter started this game, replacing Oxenchair, who'd gone back to South Africa with his injury. And it was going to be interesting to see whether or not Venter was going to be able to give the power and the strength, but also the technical ability that South Africa was going to need up front. In the 15th minute of the game, we saw a brilliant piece of individual play from Damien Willemse for South Africa. The French were on attack. They'd put a kick in behind South Africa, and Willemse was the last man in defence. He got the ball deep inside his own 22, had a couple of French players bearing down on him. He was able to avoid both of them, run up the sideline, get the ball back inside, and it got South Africa out of trouble. And when I talk in my preview videos about South Africa having a bunch of world-class players, that's exactly what I mean. They're not reliant on just 1 or 2 players in their team of doing a little bit of brilliance throughout games. No, they've got a whole list of world-class players, and we saw it on that occasion from Damien Willemse in defence, and we all know how good he is in attack as well. And then the penalty started raining for South Africa. In the next 5 minutes, we saw 2 attempts at goal from Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu, and after starting off so well with his boot, he went a little bit wayward for a couple of kicks, and he missed these 2 opportunities. That could have put South Africa out to 12 points to 7. It didn't, and the score remained 7-6 in favour of France after 20 minutes of the game. And then the next few minutes, it was all France. They were really bustling up the middle of the field with some good French forward carrying. 1-2s going off the back. Miafu was involved a lot. He was showing a lot of brilliance at the beginning of this game. Didnt was doing well, and there was a lot of emphasis going on from France at that stage, and they were rewarded with a penalty after South Africa got offside. They decided to take the kick for touch. Ramos put it deep down into South African territory, and this set up a great opportunity for France to attack again. And then from that attacking line out, it was all France on attack. They put the ball through the back line, it went out one side of the field, and then it came back up the other side, and it was Damien Penaud again that went over for France, and a brilliant try right out wide. In fact, it was so wide he went into the advertising hoardings in the dead ball area, but it was a great try from France. They'd really put the pressure on South Africa for that few minutes of the game, and they raced out to 12 points to 6, and this really got the French crowd ignited in the stadium, and the South Africans were on the back foot looking for some answers. France were taking it to them in the forwards at this stage. The scrums were starting to look a little bit more secure for South Africa, but the French, every time they got the ball in the back line, they did look dangerous, particularly from the likes of Ficou and Barisi at centre. I hadn't seen him play a lot before, but he was impressing me. Every time he got the ball, he looked dangerous for the French. The conversion from right out wide by Ramos was a good one, and France went out to 14 points to 6. Alarm bells yet for South Africa? No, I wasn't thinking so. I was just thinking they needed to work out how they could get into this game. And it was that man who was going to pull the next decision in this game. It was Rassie Erasmus. Yes, he decided to make a tactical change, and he took Boan Venter off and put on Gerhard Steenenkamp, which I thought was a really good move around about the 30-minute mark of this game. Was Rassie looking for a little bit more security up front in the scrum? Was he seeing something that could be turning this game around for South Africa? Well, it was about to happen. And then the 10 minutes leading up to half-time were absolutely critical in this game, and it was only 1 minute after Steenenkamp had got on and South Africa won the scrum. It was that man, Cobus Reinhardt, who I talked about in my preview video, who did a great kick over the top, and away he went, and he scored another one of those typical Cobus Reinhardt tries that gets South Africa right back into this game. And it was a brilliant piece of individual flair, and again, it just recognises what I say often about the South African team. They have world-class players across the whole team, talent all across the field, and Cobus Reinhardt's been doing this all year. He's been playing brilliantly from halfback, scoring good tries, and getting South Africa back in the game in this particular instance. Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu got his kicking boots back on, and we were back to 14 points to 13 after 34 minutes of the game. So with just a few minutes to go before half-time, France had a wonderful opportunity to increase their lead on the scoreboard. They did some great attacking play. The ball went down into the South African 22. There was a 10-metre line-out offensive opportunity for France. But guess what? Lut de Jager went up and stole the ball for South Africa, and that was a brilliant play for South Africa. But it was going to be that man that stole the line-out for South Africa on that occasion who just 3 minutes later, right on the half-time whistle, was actually going to get caught out in a very, very bad play. He went in to try and tackle Thomas Ramos, but he didn't really try and tackle him at all. He was leading with his shoulder, went right into Thomas Ramos' head, and the referee, Angus Gardner, who I thought up until this stage was having a brilliant game, and he made the right decision. There was no doubt about it that this was not a good play from Lut de Jager. His shoulder went straight into Thomas Ramos' head. A lot of people will say there was mitigation with Ramos being low, but Lut de Jager was making no effort to wrap his arms in this tackle at all, and I think Angus Gardner made the right call. And I could hear everybody sigh around the world at this stage saying this is going to ruin the game. We've lost a player to a red card, and as usual, this was going to disrupt the flow of the game and give South Africa a disadvantage. Well, I went to half-time with France in the lead at 14-13, saying on my Twitter account that there's no way this game's over. South Africa's going to come back even with 14 men, and I knew what was going to happen in the second half because I talked about it in my preview video. So at half-time, what do I think was said in the changing rooms? Well, I think Fabien Gaultier, despite being in the lead by 1 point, would have been a little bit nervous. He'd seen his team start off brilliantly. They were throwing everything at the South African team. This was France on a mega roll in this game. They were playing it like a Rugby World Cup final, and yet South Africa was still in the game. And I thought that's where it all led to, because South Africa were just 1 point behind at half-time, regardless of the fact that they had 14 men for the rest of the game. I thought France were blowing out all their candles, using all their matches in that first half. Yes, there was some individual brilliance from Thomas Ramos. He was probably best on the field for the French, along with Damien Penaud. We didn't see a lot of Biel Biarri in that first half. The ball just wasn't going his way. But we did see good play from Barisi and Ficou in the midfield, as I'd mentioned also in my preview video, that those guys could be dangerous. But the French forwards were doing a good job. The key here was, were they going to run out of gas? And were the South Africans' experience and ability to come over the top in the back end of this game with their bench going to be the big difference? And I thought that's what was going to happen. I said it in my preview video, and I just thought also that South Africa's got too much class in this team. We didn't see much from Kurtley Arendse or Colby in that first half. When they did get the ball, they did good things and recycled the ball back, and South Africa were just trying to play to their strengths in that first half. The game was being disrupted by France's brilliance, and I didn't think the French could keep that up for 80 minutes. So it was going to open up for South Africa in that second half if they played it right. And I'm sure that's what Rassie said at half-time. I'm sure he said, listen, we've planned for situations like this where we're down a man. We can come home in the second half. We've got the advantage off the bench as well, and we've got the players on the field that can do it. I think Rassie would have reinforced to the South Africans at half-time, look guys, we've been here before, we know what we're doing, we've got the experience, we've won in this stadium, and all those things add up to South Africa being able to come back in the second half. Well, the second half got underway, and we didn't have to wait long for Biel Biarri to get into the game. In the 43rd minute, he took a brilliant high ball. I think it was against Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu. He came down with it and had a run. And I just thought, yeah, this is the opportunity that France need, is to get this guy in the game. But South Africa were playing it smart. And they were going to try and wind the clock down a little bit, because they didn't want France scoring first in that second half. And I'm sure that's something Rassie would have said at halftime. Make sure we keep the defensive tight in the first part of the second half. Then we can make some tactical changes and we can get on top of France throughout the remainder of this game. If we go back to South Africa's performances in the second half throughout the Rugby Championship and their games of late, they've been able to storm home in the back end of the second half, and I was expecting that to happen again today. They just needed to keep France quiet in that third quarter. That was going to be absolutely paramount, and that's exactly what they worked towards. There was also some very clever tactical changes early in that second half. We got to the 47th minute mark, and Rassie decided to pull the parachute. He knew that he needed to get fresh legs on that field to make sure the defensive line was good. Up until that stage of the game, South Africa had missed 18 tackles, and this is where France had the biggest opportunity of scoring points. So we saw Etzebeth come off, and we saw Damien Dialandi come off. RG Schneemann came on, and we saw Manie Lebok come on. And I think this was a clever move, because it allowed Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu to play that roving defending player from fullback and also just in between the centres. So that was going to be a big play, and having Manie Lebok on there, they could alternate at number 10, or Manie Lebok could take control. I thought that was a really clever play from Rassie at that stage. And then between the 53rd and the 55th minute, that's when we started to see things change. The South African scrum started to get on top. And this was probably something that a lot of people weren't expecting to see, particularly with France having their big bench and their 6-2 split. But we saw South Africa get some good scrums in that period of play. They got some scrum penalties, and this allowed them to just control the game. A very important part of it when they were down to 14 men. We'd seen 17 minutes of the second half before any more points were scored after half-time, and this time it came to France. We saw a great charge down from Giroud, who had come on for France, nearly leading to a French try. But France were rewarded a penalty. Thomas Ramos got the kick over, and France went out to 17 points to 13. Was this going to be decisive in the game? Well, no, I didn't think so. We had the last 20 minutes to go, and this is where I expected South Africa to really shine. Fabien Gaultier realised around that stage of the game that he needed some fresh legs on, so we saw Luku come on at halfback. Dupont came on as well, and he was trying to shore up that back line. Remember, 6-2 split. there was going to be a lot of emphasis on what the French forwards could do coming off the bench, but the same with the South Africans. So I thought the last 20 minutes of this game was going to be really interesting. Were we going to see the South Africans do what they had done consistently throughout this year and put on a great second half performance? It was only that game against Australia in Johannesburg, sorry South African fans, got to remind you of that one, where South Africa fell away in games. But since then, they've been able to turn their second half performances, particularly in that last 20 minutes, into absolutely dynamo performances. Between the 58th minute and the 62nd minute, we saw 4 penalties awarded to South Africa. And this was pressure that they were starting to put on France, and France were obliging by giving away these opportunities. This was what South Africa wanted. They wanted to be able to control the game. And the 4th penalty, well, it led to a yellow card for France. Yes, Biel going for an intercept because France were under pressure from South Africa, and he saw the only opportunity in being able to grab an intercept. He was nowhere near it at all. The right decision was made by Angus Gardner, and off Biel went at a critical time of the game. So here's the thing for me, in that 20 minutes of the second half, that first 20 minutes of the second half with a one-man advantage, France couldn't get away from South Africa. They couldn't put a lot of points on the board. So I thought, okay, when Biel went off and we were down to 14 men all, I thought this is where South Africa were really going to get the advantage. Russie had made the changes off the bench. He'd got fresh legs on. We'd seen the likes of Esterhuizen come on. R.G. Snyman was on. And South Africa were ready to take it to the French. Well, we only had to wait 2 minutes after Biel went off, and South Africa got right up close to the line, and we saw that man, Andrew Esterhuizen, go over and score a great try. It was on the back of the great forward work from South Africa. Andre Esterhuizen playing in there in the forwards in this particular game, and went over and scored a good try that was managed well by the South African forwards. And this is exactly what they do. They grind you down in the second half. And unless you've got a very strong bench that can match them, and I don't think there's anyone in World Rugby that's got that at the moment, maybe England, but I'll hold that for another day. But we saw South Africa putting this to good use. So that brought South Africa really back into the game. And you know what? This was really important for them psychologically to get really close to France, knowing now that they were back on terms in terms of having 14 men on the pitch. Now, Sasha got really close with the conversion, and in fact it hit the post, but the important thing here was that South Africa were now in the lead by 1 point, 18 points to 17, and all that work that France had done in the first half to get the lead and to use up all that energy, now they were playing man for man, 14 against 14. And I thought South Africa were just going to grind it home from here, and that we were going to see more of this individual brilliance that I talk about from these world-class South African players across the field. France were getting tired. If this was a heavyweight battle, this game, as I said earlier, it was like a World Cup final game. But I thought France were a heavyweight boxer that had been punch-struck a few times. That's why they started giving away a lot of penalties. They were starting to get tired. They were starting to get ground down by this South African presence in the scrums and in the lineouts as well. And then in the next 4 minutes, we saw South Africa getting more penalties. First of all, Malcolm Marx earned a great penalty for being over top of the ball in the breakdown and securing that for South Africa. Next one, Mani Lebok got a good kick for touch from a penalty. And it wasn't long before South Africa were back on attack. On the 70th minute, we saw a brilliant run from that man, Grant Williams, who'd come on for Cobus Tronat and got a fantastic try. He basically walked through the French defensive line, who at that stage had basically turned off, I thought, and got very tired indeed. There was a gaping hole there for Grant Williams to run through. And as I've talked about in all my videos about South Africa, Grant Williams is exactly the guy you want to have coming on the field if he's not starting the game for the Springboks, because this is the sort of impact that he can have. And it was a brilliant executed try. He saw the opportunity, the gap opened up, and he went and scored behind the post. And this was absolutely what South Africa wanted. And from this point on, there was no turning back. There was no chance, I thought, that France were going to get back into this game. So Grant Williams' try put South Africa out to 23 points to 17. The conversion was good from Sasha, 25 points to 17. And we only had about 6 or 7 minutes to go in the game. Would France be able to get back into it? No. They kept giving away penalties, and it kept giving South Africa the opportunity to go into game management mode. But the big thing that's different in this game of this era of the South African team is we don't see South Africa trying to wind down the clock. We see the South African team willing to play rugby, willing to be expansive and to put the sword to the opposition. This is a different South African team of what we've seen from different generations. Normally with this type of game, South Africa would have closed it down, kicked for touch, controlled it through the forwards, but they were still looking to open the game up and running the ball at most opportunities, and that's what is really exciting about this particular South African team. And I guess the icing on the cake was in the 76th minute, while Sacha Feinberg and Ngoma got the opportunity to run close to the French line. He decided to dart for himself, the gap opened up, and he put himself through to score the final try in this game, which was a great conclusion for the South African team, and they'd end up scoring 3 tries in that last 20 minutes of the game. And once again, as I've said before, they finish off the game brilliantly, and they can put any team to the sword even when they're down to 14 men. Sacha had to convert his own try, of course, so it was 32-17 and just a couple of minutes left in the game, and there was no way that France were even going to get back on the scoreboard at this stage. So they were only able to score a penalty goal in the second half, France, while South Africa put on 19 points. And that's the difference with this South African team. So you might go to half-time with the lead and think that you're in the game, but unless you're able to score a bunch of points in the second half, the South African team is going to roll over the top of you and put you to the sword, and that's exactly what happened in this game. So once again, as I've said before, the South African team is full of world-class players. They all contributed in this game. We saw a big performance from Khaleesi until Rassie took him off early in this game, and it just shows that not only are you playing against the South African players, but you're playing against a master tactician in Rassie Erasmus as the head coach of the Springboks team. He made some significant changes throughout this game by taking Etzebeth and Diolandi off when he did. I thought was brilliant. Bringing Steenenkamp on in that 30-odd minute in the first half was also a brilliant move. That gave them an opportunity to go after those scrums, and the scrum penalty started flowing from that time in. And when the rest of the bench came on for South Africa, we saw the individual brilliance. Andre Esterhuizen being involved in that hybrid player role, of course, in getting over and scoring that great try. But we saw the likes of Malcolm Marx getting in there at the breakdown. We saw big performances from R.G. Schneemann when he came on as well. And also Manie Libbok was able to control the game, and having him and Sacha on at the same time was absolutely brilliant, I thought, as well. It gave South Africa a different dimension at the back, and they looked really, really good for it. So again, it wasn't a game for Cheslin Colby and Kirtley Arendse to score a lot of tries, or Damian Willemse, but we saw South Africa doing it through other means. The Andre Esterhuizen try came from great forward play and development towards the French line and putting them under pressure. Sacha Feinberg and Ngoma Zulu's try was just that individual brilliance at the end. And the other good try was Cobus Reinhardt, who was again a bit of individual brilliance. So this is where South Africa can share it across the pitch, and they can really put teams under pressure. Now, I don't talk about it much in my videos, as you know, but the refereeing I thought of this game was absolutely outstanding. I think Angus Gardner did a brilliant job in this game. His decisions were clear. His communication was very clear. He wasn't getting flustered by the occasion, by the crowd. He was taking his time. He told the players exactly what he was thinking, the process that he was going through. I think this was one of the outstanding refereeing performances of the year. I don't think either team could say otherwise. I think France got their just desserts with the Luke de Jager red card. That was a good call. Angus Gardner stayed his ground on that one and made that decision. It was the right decision for the game. It didn't ruin the game of rugby at all. South Africa had their opportunity. The BL Berry decision was brilliant. It was no way he was going to get an intercept. He went for a deliberate knock-on. He was sent from the field with a yellow card. Again, Angus Gardner got it right, and he played a fantastic game, and I think he contributed to this game being a brilliant game. So how did South Africa actually win this game? Well, the first thing they did well was they stayed in the game in the first half. If France had got away with 2 or 3 tries, it would have been a lot harder for South Africa, particularly down to 14 men. So I think that was the first thing that was really important. And despite the great start by France, they ran out of gas. They ran out of their ability to keep that emotion and that passion high, which is what you expect from a French team. France rugby teams are normally like a Christmas gift that you haven't unwrapped. There's a lot of hype and a lot of potential, but when you open it, it's sometimes disappointing and it doesn't live up to its full potential. And that's what I see sometimes in French rugby teams. And that's what I saw again last night. They had a lot of brilliant players. Of course, Dupont was missing, and all the French will say that he could make the difference. But at the end of the day, it was South Africa's tactical masterclass and their brilliance across the pitch with a number of world-class players that won this game for them. So I'm not going to highlight too many. The ones that scored the tries for the South Africans were good, but there was a lot of good work going on off the ball. Peter Steph du Toit again was having a great game. And also the likes of Ruan Nortje did a good job when he came on, as did R.G. Schneemann. But it was that front row, Wilco Low coming on, really making a difference as well for the South African team. He's been one of their standouts coming off the bench this year, no doubt about it. And we've got to give credit also to Steenenkamp, who came on in the first half and did a very good job for South Africa. Look, I thought rugby was the winner at the Stade De France. First of all, last night it was a brilliant game of rugby. It was intense, it was passionate, there was a roller coaster effect. There was swings and gains from each side, and then we saw the world champions do what the world champions do in that second half and came home with a strong wind in their sails. No team on the planet, I believe, at the moment can catch them. They're just way ahead in terms of their second half performance. Until we see other teams like Ireland, New Zealand, England be able to put together 80 minutes of rugby with strong second half performances, they're going to find it incredibly difficult to beat this South African team. Kudos to Siya Kolisi. He didn't really have the game that he probably wanted, but South Africa as a team won the game, and that's all he would be worried about. Congratulations to Eben Etzebeth, another magnificent cap for the South Africans, and a great team performance from South Africa again to get them across the line. For France, I thought they had some outstanding players last night. Damien Penaud was one of them. Thomas Ramos was another one. He played absolutely brilliant. Gillard at number 8, he tried all game long. He was very good as well. And I thought Mi Fu had a great game in the forwards, but they just weren't good enough for long enough, France. And that's why they didn't win this one last night at the Stade de France. But it was a great game of rugby. I'd love to hear your views and opinions, so let me know in the comments below what you thought of the game. If you're not from South Africa, I'd like to know what you thought as a neutral as well, if you're not French. I'd love to know what you thought of the spectacle that was at the Stade de France. Maybe we need to play all the big games in France from now on, because it always produces at the Stade de France some fantastic rugby games. And I couldn't be more satisfied with what I saw last night in this particular performance. So there we go, that's it for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll be back again really soon with some more reviews right here on Inside Rugby with Mark. It's time to say adios from beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Until next time, keep safe, keep enjoying your rugby across the world, and it's bye for now.